The Cellmate. It's not that I don't know how to write. People presume this because I'm a criminal. It's simply there isn't much to write about on this side of the iron bars, especially in isolation, where I had remained for many, many years. I suppose I could have written about my past, but my memories are all I have, and I fear, superstitiously perhaps, that if I put them onto paper, they will fade from my mind. But since I now have something to write, and since this may be my only opportunity to do so, I shall explain why I had to kill my cellmate. I was placed in isolation 11 years ago after an unfortunate incident involving a guard in the business end of a shank. If they knew what he was, they wouldn't have put me down here. They would have been thanking me. Alas, the words of a criminal falls only onto pious ears, and so they refused to believe and sent me down here to rot. In isolation, my world was cramped, lonely, and void of just about any stimulation sanity would require in order not to snap. But my brain was resilient. I never lost my mind. My world was 8 by 6 feet. In each corner, against the innermost wall, were concrete slabs, raised just over a foot off the floor. One of these I used as a table. The other I turned into my bed, using the blanket as a mattress, and whites tied into a ball as my pillow. Against the inner wall on either side of my large metal door was both a basin with a sink that allowed me 10 seconds of warm water 10 times a day, though it's rarely ever warm, and a toilet, which could only be flushed once a day, which is more than enough when you're forced into a 1,200-calorie diet. My personal items consisted of soap, a plastic spork, a pocket-sized toothbrush, toothpaste, envelopes, 3 books and 2 sets of whites, thermal shirts and sweats, which you'll need this deep in the prison's cold belly, especially in the winter, when it gets so chilly down here you daren't even get out of bed. And I wasn't permitted pencils or even crowns, but I'd always ask for envelopes anyway. I'd use them for origami. 6 times a day a silver badge would peek through the thin window of my door. 3 times a day a tray of food pushed through the door slot. Twice a week I was taken to a shower, and once a week I could get my laundry done. There was no window, and I hadn't seen sunlight for nearly a decade. This was my world. My sun was fluorescent, my God was absent, and I was alone, until one day there was a rapping upon my metal door. For a moment I thought I'd lost count of the days and quickly began gathering my clothes for wash. Why else would anyone knock? Then I stopped, because I noticed the badge of the man on the other side of the door was not silver, but gold. A gold badge was paying me a visit, and he brought with him music to my ears. "Prison's overpopulated, underfunded, and understaffed," he said. "We got 4 men to a cell, 5 in some cases." A delusionally optimistic part of my brain actually thought the gold badge was going to release me. "No more room in this place," he was about to say. "You don't gotta go home, but you can't stay here." He continued, "The short of it is, you're getting a cellie. Don't know for how long, but it's happening. Be accommodating and move your shit." At which point he pointed to my table, where my books and origami creations lay. I didn't like this, losing my workspace, but I supposed it'd be a fair trade for some company, so I did as I was asked and rearranged my belongings. A few hours later there was another rap at the door, this time followed immediately by the clang of a key as it finds its way home. The door swung open, and in came my new roommate. He introduced himself as Henry. He was a gangly fellow, a tall glass of water, pasty white and completely bald, with a jagged scar in the middle of his face running from his forehead down to his lips, which were thin and colorless. His shoulders were narrow and slumped, and upon speaking I noticed he had an awfully hindering stutter. Yes, he was quite odd, but I did my best to make him feel welcome. I gave Henry the grand tour. I showed him my books, my mini origami figurines, which were now on the floor at the foot of my slab. I introduced him to Sally the spider, shared with him leftover cornbread. I even let him glimpse my prized possession, a magazine cutout of Heather Graham in roller skates from the film Boogie Nights. Despite my rolling out the red carpet, Henry merely nodded before stammering, "Very nice." Very nice? I share with him my world, and all he can say is very nice? That was the first sign that something was off with this man. The next came the first night. At 10 o'clock p.m., 2 of the 3 fluorescent lights embedded in the ceiling turn off. This is lights out, and though it is hardly a complete darkness, in fact it's still quite bright, it is as dark as my world gets, and so when this occurs, I lay down to sleep. The lights had just gone out. My eyes were closed, and as I recounted this eventful day, I became dimly aware of a faint sound, slowly growing in intensity as I lay listening. Clicking. Clicking like a rodent gnawing on a bit of stale bread, or a dying woman calling for her cats one final time. Incrementally, the clicking grew louder. Soon it was not faint at all. It became distinct. It became alien. It was the sound of an enormous praying mantis singing to its beheaded lover as he mindlessly ejaculates into her armored body. It was coming from Henry, and I dared not open my eyes. The next morning was when I noticed how he would eat. He'd hunch over his tray as if afraid I was going to steal his food. Me, who showed nothing but generosity to this stuttering wretch. He ate like Sally the spider when feasting upon an insect, his face nearly in his meal as he shoveled it between his thin lips. Disgusting. He'd touch my origami, saying he loved them. Of course he did. He wanted them. He wanted all of my things. He wanted my slab. In his mind, it'd make a fine table. But all this was nothing compared to when I awoke one night to find this animal violating himself to the image of my roller girl. I'd had enough of this madness. This freak was turning my orderly world upside down. He was to be my ruin. They must have sent him here to torment me, revenge for killing one of their own, to break my spirit and thus my mind. But as I said before, I am resilient. I'd not let them get the better of me. I resigned to ignoring the gangly man, though as difficult as that was, it worked, for a time, until one night. Henry had been my cellmate for just over a month, and after a near physical altercation I'd finally convinced him not to speak, nor was he to cross over onto my half of the cell, not even to use the basin unless with my expressed permission. Things seemed to be looking up. Maybe, just maybe, I could make this work. Then again, maybe not. It was after lights out, silence except for the indistinct jive of two guards somewhere in the hall, and the low, monotonous hum of the single fluorescent bulb overhead. My eyes were closed, flirting with sleep, and I was just about to drift when I heard the clicking. Hardly audible at first, but increasing rapidly in volume, a constant and inhuman clicking coming from that thing they locked me up with. It was the clicking of eyeless things which crawl beneath the earth, of scuttling abominations with countless legs and fangs primed with venom. It was the clicking of the doomsday clock itself, marking the seconds before hell would open up and swallow me whole. It came closer. I could hear the clicking mere inches from my face. I could feel the hot breath of the thing against my flesh. It smelled like the rotting carcasses of creatures so bloated and putrid, unimaginable sea monsters washed upon some alien shore of shit and sulfur. I could not take it. I could not keep my eyes closed. I had to glimpse the cosmic horror which loomed over me as I feigned sleep. My eyes shot open, and I leapt up to my feet. "What world have you come from?" I was ready to shout, but the words became stuck in my throat and fell like rocks into the pit of my soul. Standing before me was the gangly thing. Just as my eyes fell upon it, its face split open down the middle, from forehead to mouth, and peeled open sideways like a strange and beautiful flower, before millions of wriggling feelers began worming their way out from the exposed skull. The clicking had crescendoed into an ear-splitting hiss. The thing's head fell away to the floor like a mask, leaving only a throng of squirming, fingered antennae flailing in the pale light. Its entire body began to convulse, but before it could finish changing, I leapt upon the thing. Brave as I was, resilient as I am, I wrapped my big hands around the thing's gaunt neck and squeezed and squeezed. I didn't stop until I heard several bones in its throat break into splinters. I strangled the life out of the alien invader on the cold ground of my world, killing it, just as I'd done before, and just as I'll do again. The end.